Hello and welcome to Scale to Seven Figures and our $1 Million Fireside Chat. I am Lisa Anderson, Strategic Business Advisor, Virtual CFO with Anavo Transformation Solutions and your $1 Million Mentor. And I am excited you are joining me. Scale to Seven Figures is an interactive group of small business owners in the business to corporate, and business to government markets who are ready to scale their businesses to the next level. Our group is an opportunity to share, learn, and grow together without competition. Each week, I bring tips, tactics, and strategies through our $1 Million Masterclasses and our $1 Million Fireside Chats. If you are not familiar with us, head on over to www.scaletosevenfigures.com and check us out. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy our next powerful conversation. Well, hello everybody, and welcome. Happy Wednesday to you. Welcome to today's $1 Million Fireside Chat. I am really excited, as always, that you are here joining us today. And if you have an opportunity, just let me know that you're there. Let us know in the chat that you are watching us, that you're tuning in, and let us know where you're watching from. And the reason why I ask you to let us know where you're watching from is because we are streaming across 5 different locations. So we're in 3 different locations on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn, and we're also on YouTube. And so I'd love to know where you're listening, where you're joining us, and just let us know. All right. So I am Lisa Anderson, your strategic business advisor and virtual CFO with Anavo Transformation Solutions, and I am your $1 Million Mentor. This month of October, we've been talking a lot about building capacity. And most specifically, we've been talking about getting your legal house in order, because that is absolutely important. Last week, we had tax attorney Beverly Winstead, who came into the discussion to share a little bit about ways in which to keep the IRS out of your assets. And I love the way that she said that, but just keep the IRS out of your assets and grow your legacy through effective tax planning, because now is the time. Now is the time to do a little bit of tax planning. So hopefully last week you had an opportunity to download our year-end tax planning checklist, and you have an opportunity to sit with your accountants, take a look at your numbers, and understand where you stand before we get to the end of the year, because when we get to the end of the year, it'll be too late to try to mitigate any risk. Now is the time to do that. Today, we are going to conclude our conversation regarding legal capacity, building legal capacity. And we're going to focus most specifically on equitable ways to settle disputes. And my guest today is legal arbitrator and super powerhouse attorney Kelly Charles Collins. She is going to join us today to share insights on how to optimize your legalities. I'm going to say that, optimize your legalities by engaging your legal team proactively to keep you and your business out of court. So give me a second while I have Kelly join in with me. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, welcome. Lisa, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you.
You've been super busy.
Yeah.
Right? To say the least.
Busy is good.
Busy is good. Yes. Well, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Me too.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about who you are and tell us about your practice.
Well, I'm Kelly Charles Collins, and I empower smart leaders and organizations to stay on the right side of the next hashtag movement. My legal practice is no longer in play because I retired. I retired from the practice of law at the end of last year. This year is my 25th anniversary, but I still am a practicing arbitrator and a certified mediator. So I've been arbitrating for 10 years as an arbitrator, a little over 10 years. And then also, in my legal practice, I did arbitrations on behalf of my clients and also mediations. And so now I'm on the other side where I'm actually mediating the cases and arbitrating.
Wow. So what's the difference between arbitration and mediation?
Good
Or
question.
is there a difference?
There's a huge difference.
Okay.
So when you are talking about mediation, those are negotiated settlements where the clients have the control over what happens in those discussions. So we come together, the mediator acts as a neutral party to help to facilitate the discussions between the parties to see if they can come to some resolution. An arbitration, on the other hand, is like going through a lawsuit where I, as an arbitrator, actually preside over the case. And so I listen to evidence, I review and take testimony, and then I will draft an order or enter a ruling in the matter. So I sit essentially as a judge.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't. Always thought they were the same thing. So that was great information for me.
And both can be done within the court setting and outside of the court setting. So you don't have to be in a lawsuit to be engaged in either of those things. It could be two business owners who are having some type of dispute and they can't come to a resolution, and they either, I would say probably most in that situation, they would be in mediation to try to come to some resolution. But the great thing about mediation is that the parties themselves are the ones who decide what the resolution is. The mediator does not. We don't tell you what to do. We just facilitate those discussions.
I see. Okay.
And an arbitrator does, in fact, enter a ruling.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. Well, before we dive into that conversation, I have a follow-on question on that. But before we dive in, tell us a little bit about the types of, so in terms of what you do now and the types of customers, who ideally do you work with?
So as far as arbitration, I actually work through the American Arbitration Association. And additionally, I have my own mediation and arbitration firm called Resolve It ADR. My background and my expertise is in employment law litigation. And so anything to do with, sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation, but also things around contract disputes. A lot of people, have non-competes, anything to do with business litigation. And I also practiced in the area of personal injury. And so I do mediate those types of cases and arbitrate those types of cases. And I have a wealth of knowledge as a lawyer. So as long as I can understand the substance of the law and people's arguments, it really is a broad range. But any type of civil matter around personal injury, property, or employment litigation and business litigation.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. All right. So my follow-on question.
Yes.
Mediation, arbitration, litigation. They're all three different things. Yeah. Litigation is where you actually see yourself in court.
Well, so you could be in litigation and end up in arbitration or mediation. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
So let's talk about it in terms of there is a lawsuit between parties, right? So let's not talk about it right now just as in a regular business dispute. And again, this will vary by jurisdiction and by state and whether you're in state court or a federal court. However, when people get involved in a lawsuit, what courts really try to do is what is the best way, the easiest way that we can resolve these situations, save judicial resources, and the parties want to do that too. So like in Florida, where I am and where I practice, in federal court, you're ordered to mediation automatically. Once you have a case, you're going to have to go to mediation. Some state courts are the same way, that they will order you to mediation because they want to try to get the cases resolved.
Okay.
Generally, when people go to mediation, though, it's after some money and time and effort has been spent because we need to gather enough information to actually have the discussion. Sometimes we could do it a little bit earlier. State courts here in Florida have actually in the jurisdiction that I just moved from in the Tampa area, what they've started to do is to send cases to what's called non-binding arbitration, which is arbitration where there's a decision, but the parties don't have to be bound by it. If they choose to be, they can. And if not, it'll go back to what you call litigation, which means we're going to go through the process of maybe ending up in trial. Okay. And so you can end up in arbitration through the court process because they've sent you to arbitration or mediation, or your agreement can say that if there is a dispute as it relates to this agreement, that dispute must be arbitrated. So you'll see that a lot in retail sales installment contracts, and when you buy a car, right? A lot of those have arbitration clauses, and more contracts you'll see have arbitration clauses. So they force you to go into arbitration. They're not really forced, but make you go to arbitration as opposed to being in the court system.
Okay. So I'm gonna tell you why I always thought arbitration clauses ended up in contracts.
Okay.
So I'm learning something new today, but I always thought they ended up in contract agreement. So, you know, as a small business owner, you have to have your legal house in order. I'm always thinking strategy. And so moving forward with my eyes wide open, just making certain that we have the right agreements in place before we execute them. And so our attorneys have helped us to write our agreements, and the arbitration clauses ended up in there. And early on, I asked about it. So I thought it was because it's a simple way to settle a dispute. Is probably what I thought may have been the most equitable way to settle a dispute. But tell me, but it sounds like it's almost a necessity to have the arbitration clauses in your contracts.
It's not necessarily a necessity. So here's the difference. The difference in having an arbitration clause: arbitrations are faster. They're less, for the most part, they're faster, and they're less expensive. One of the reasons that makes it less expensive is that we don't allow, in certain types of cases, the same rules around what we call discovery or gathering of information. So you're not going to be taking 50 million depositions. You're not going to be sending a million, questions, which are called interrogatories, or requests for production, which is a request for documents. You're not going to be doing all of those things. And our goal is to try to get these cases resolved within 90 days, within 6 months, within very short periods of time. Whereas in litigation, you could have a case 3 years from now, 4 years from now, you're still in court because you have to go through that whole process. So that's why people want it in there. And also it is less expensive, right, for litigants. So especially when you're talking about somebody who, bought a car, maybe there's like a lemon law issue. And so you have a consumer arbitration. You don't want that person who may not have an attorney to be going through all of these hoops and not even understanding, what they're supposed to do. And in arbitration, you can have someone who's not a lawyer assist you, right? Whereas sometimes when in court, if you own a business, the business cannot be represented by an individual, has to be represented by a lawyer. And so they're just different. There are different ways to get to resolving the issue, but because you can get in faster, get out faster, and get in less expensive and get out less expensive.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So we're on the same page, but I just kind of had different nuances, different understand, or more simplistic, I think, understanding.
That's all right. Simplistic is good.
Hey, yeah. So, and I love the way that you broke it down, because that's what it's all about. The work that we do with small businesses, it is all about breaking the complex thing down, explaining it, so that the business owners can move forward with ease, with confidence, and with the competency to be able to stand on their own.
Yeah.
Have really powerful conversations, even complex conversations, because they have the knowledge.
Yeah. And that's really my gift, is to make complex things simple. And I've done that throughout my career as a lawyer. And even, in my arbitrations, I try to make sure that my orders, because sometimes, like right now, I have cases where it's pro se, meaning that the plaintiff is representing themselves. And so, I have to be able to speak to those people too who do not have a legal background, and at the same time speak to my legal colleagues. So I think it's really important. And I think it's important for people to understand the difference. So if people were thinking like you, that mediation and arbitration are the same thing, it's really important that people understand what these terms mean and the impact on their business. And so, if you want to be in control of the outcome, right? The parties want to be in control, then you want to go to mediation. If you want somebody else to decide for you, then you go to arbitration or you go to trial by a judge or jury.
Okay. Got it. Love it. Love it. Thank you. So I'm always thinking about strategy. And when it comes to getting your legal house in order, the greatest strategy that I offer to my clients is that today, just remember, today is the best day for any contract. And today being before you sign on a dotted line. So strategically, we're encouraging small businesses to engage various aspects of their legal house in the beginning versus when we're in the middle of a dispute,
right?
And now we have to try to defend our positioning, versus having put these things in place, and maybe now we can settle it through mediation or some other means. But so I want to talk strategically. But first, before we do that, I want to say two words. And I want you to tell me what you think about these two words. So the first one is entanglement.
Really?
Hey, you said on the other side of the hashtag.
Well, you can get entangled. If you don't have your legal house in order, you will get entangled and become the next hashtag, right? You want to make sure that all of your ducks are in a row. So that you don't get entangled in litigation, you don't get tied up in the court system. Lawsuits are expensive, right? And so there are many people who think, oh, I'll just sue, or, if something happens, we'll just go to court. And they think, oh, it's principle, right? But principle costs money. And so we have to really be mindful of that. And when we think about entanglements can come out of all kinds of things. And so when you're talking about contracts, even just the wording of the contract could land you in court, land you in a lawsuit, because what you thought it meant is not what it meant, right? So you may think, oh, I'm having an arbitration clause because if something happens, we'll just work it out together, because you think that that's mediation when that's not what it is. Now, in mediation, where for me, where I am with the AAA, the American Arbitration Association, parties can still also go to mediation, right? And parties can always resolve their claims on their own, and they don't have to do it through formal mediation. Mediation is just a process, but I could pick up the phone and call you and say, can we settle this? And it can be done. So there's ways to get entangled, and then there's ways to get disentangled.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. I like that. Second word, my favorite one. Most favorite word in the English language, which is leverage.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Oh my God, I love that word.
Well, because we're in my group, ladies who leverage. So that is my favorite word. We have to understand what our gifts are, right? We have to understand what our gifts are, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and figure out how to leverage all of those things. And then obviously over, the past several months, outside of doing my arbitrations and mediations, I'm an expert in unconscious bias. So I've been doing a lot of training and speaking around, racial justice. And so we talk about white privilege and leveraging your privilege. So there's all types of ways to use that word, but it's such a powerful word, because some people may think, oh, leverage in a negative way, that you're doing it to somehow manipulate, right? So, but you don't think of leverage in terms of manipulation. Think about it in terms of, how can I best position myself? So, how can I best leverage my expertise? So for me, when I retired as a lawyer, how could I best leverage my expertise as a lawyer and doing something else. And I knew that I could leverage that into becoming a professional speaker and consultant for organizations, because I could then leverage my expertise as a trial lawyer in the areas that I was, to then help them as they move forward with all of these other topics. So I love that word, and I'm glad that that's your favorite word too.
Oh, it is.
Because I think it's so important.
It is extremely important. And it is exactly what you said. How is better positioning
Mhm.
is how, I always like to use it. How can you make certain that, as we build legacies, which is ultimately what, the stretch that we are trying to help companies get to. When you're building a legacy, how can you best position your asset, right? And use it in in the most favorable ways for yourself, for the community, and then for your clients.
Yeah. And so when you're talking about arbitration, right, and
Mm-hmm.
mediation, having an arbitration clause is leverage, because it, when you're talking about going to court, court gives you a lot of room, right, to create a lot of stuff and rack up fees, which again, racking up fees in litigation is a leverage point, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have an arbitration clause, that is also leverage, because attorneys realize that that is not a space that they're going to be able to rack up their billable hours or rack up, whatever fees. And so everything that we're doing around this is leverage. Now, sometimes being in litigation is also leverage, right? The ability to say, I am going to sue you in court, that could also be leverage to be able to resolve an issue. So we just, with all of these things, we have to look at what is the best play when it comes to how you're going to use that in your business, either to your advantage and generally to somebody else's disadvantage.
Sure. So let's talk strategy, day one strategy, because, ultimately we want to position ourselves where we don't have to go to court. We want to try to, smooth sailing, no disputes. Although there's going to be disagreement, right? Exactly. But there's going to be disagreements in business, right? And just being able, I like what you said earlier, where you said, sometimes you can just pick up the phone and say, hey, can we settle this? How can we resolve this? And it's just a matter of conversation.
Yeah.
But when we think about, being strategic in our moves and, best leveraging our positions from the beginning, what are some of the tips that you can offer, top 3 that you can offer to small businesses to start thinking about doing right now?
Well, one, if you're going to be in business, have contracts, right? So that means have a lawyer. So that doesn't mean going on, Google, my best friend, Google, and just pulling off the first contract that you see and say, okay, this is going to be the contract. Now, those are good starting places if you don't have a lawyer. But remember that those are made for the general public. And when you're talking about your business and whatever business arrangement that you're getting into, you want to make sure that it is specific to your business and that the terms and conditions that are in there are related to your business and mean what you think they mean. Right. So that's one thing. I'll say, first, get a lawyer. Second, make sure that your contracts are in order. And probably third, or maybe, I don't even know if these go in that order, but figure out who you're doing business with. Right. So you want to talk about entanglement? Think about who you're getting entangled with, whether that is your business partner, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a customer, whether it's somebody that you're buying something, just as in whatever kind of contractual relationship that you're in, who you're hiring. Right. Because obviously, as an employment lawyer, those are things that are top of mind for me. Like, who are you hiring? Are you giving them employment contracts? So think about who you're getting entangled with. 2, have a lawyer. Always have a lawyer. It's funny because I, as an employment lawyer, I would always say this, that everybody has a tax attorney, they have their accountant, they have their bookkeeper, they have all these things. And I said, do you
No,
have an
they
employment attorney? No. Why do I need an employment? You have employees. How could you not have an employment attorney?
yeah.
But people look at, especially if you have employees, you should have an employment attorney, either on retainer or somebody that you can reach out to, because those are the issues that will really get you in hot water, right? And so you really need to have an attorney, an employment attorney on call, on staff, on speed dial whenever you're having an issue, because you're going to pay now or pay later, and pay later is generally a lot more. So
A
that's
lot
what I would
more.
say.
I love that you said that, because that is one of the key areas where, as your business scales, the rules change very quickly.
Very.
You become subject to a lot of different things, and then you have to worry whether you scale or not. In some cases, you have to be concerned about the different laws in different localities where people are working.
Yeah.
And so it's a sliding scale. So you've got to be able to understand
Yeah.
those
And
rules.
people think that, if I have one employee, no, there's rules related to you having just one employee, right? And when we're talking, a lot of people think about Title VII. When we're talking about
Mhm.
employer-employee issues, they think about Title VII, and they say, oh, well, I need to have 15 employees or more. But there are a lot of state and local ordinances, that state laws and city and local ordinances, that only require you to have maybe 4 or 5 employees, right? That you're
Mm.
still subject to. So, you have to be mindful of that. And then when you're talking about employment cases, most of those do not end up in arbitration. Now, I do a
Mhm.
lot of arbitration and employment law cases. However, most of them are in court. Those are in litigation. Now, 98% of them settle,
Yeah.
right? Around 98% of them will settle. But that's after you have expended time, energy, resources, and lots of money,
Yeah.
right, to go through some of the process.
My grandson is trying to leverage his position right now.
Hey,
So let's please ignore him.
now,
That's what he's saying.
right?
um, so Department of Labor,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the employment law and serving and supporting companies from that perspective, um, can you talk a little bit, or do you get involved with Department of Labor at all?
I don't really, unless it's a so the Department of Labor, people generally go complain about the fact that they didn't get paid. The Department of Labor will
Mhm.
do audits, right? So
Mhm.
you never want to have the Department of Labor in your workspace ever, right?
Ever.
Because when they come in, they're coming in to find something. So going back to having your ducks in a row, if you employ children, if like younger people, everything that you're supposed to have with regards to pay. When the Department of Labor really will come into play too is overtime issues, right?
Yeah.
Or misclassification. And so
Mhm.
you may have a Fair Labor Standards Act claim or some type of state pay claim. And so I don't necessarily deal with the Department of Labor, but I deal with issues around pay that could end up at the Department of Labor, causing them to come to your organization to audit you.
Yeah. And what I've learned over the years is that it just takes one phone call, one inquiry. Um, you may get a phone call to just, kind of let you know you need to follow the rules,
Or you get a
but
visit.
or you get a visit. And, I tell clients all the time, that's one audit you don't ever want to
Them
have
and
to.
OSHA.
Yeah.
The
Mm,
Department of Labor and OSHA, you don't want either two of those organizations in your business. So you need to do whatever you need to do to make sure that all of your ducks are in a row. And,
mhm.
oftentimes how the Department of Labor ends up in your organization is that, especially small businesses think everybody is a manager, right? So they don't
Mhm.
have to pay overtime, or everybody is 1099,
Yeah. Oh my
right?
God.
Misclassification of workers will get you in so much trouble and cost you so much money. And the thing to understand is that you could owe that employee $2,000, right, in overtime pay. That could be your mistake. However, the attorney may have racked up $20,000 in fees just trying to figure out whether or not that, you owe this $2,000. There's no discussion about whether or not they're getting their $20,000. So the attorney's going to get the $20,000 and this employee is going to get $2,000 because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And you thought everybody's a 1099. Everybody is, because I say you have a salary, that means that you're not entitled to overtime. And that's not how that works.
Yeah. And I think that's important for us to have this conversation right now because we are operating in a pandemic. A lot of people have been displaced, so they're out of work. Lots of businesses, I'm sorry, I won't say businesses. A lot of people are stepping into consultancy. And so businesses are hiring consultants. But when I saw this happen in 2008, 2009, when the market fell, and same thing, people were displaced. Consultants, people who were improperly classified as consultants went to file for unemployment because their contracts had ended. That's how the State Department and federal identified that these people were misclassified. So a lot of people got in trouble. A lot of businesses got in trouble because of that. So it's really, really important, I think, right now to really take the time to understand what those requirements are.
And the Department of Labor's website is really good. It has a lot of information. It has all kinds of fact sheets that tell you exactly what things mean. If you want to know if somebody is an hourly employee, so exempt versus non-exempt, if you want to know that, it will tell you what that means. And it will also take you through the qualifications that are required to be able to call somebody an exempt employee. And obviously, some of it will be more than people can understand. So again, that's why you need an employment lawyer. Because so here's the thing. So we think, oh, I have a lawyer, but not all lawyers understand everything, right? So I don't do property law. So don't come to me and ask me about real estate or any of that stuff. I can read it and I can generally tell you, but that is not my expertise. So same thing when you're talking about how to run your business and protect yourself. And also, it's not just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting your employees, right? You want to ensure that the people who are working for you are also protected because they're the ones who help you to bring in the business and make money. So, it's not just about CYA, right? It's you need to also be concerned about the people who work for you.
Yeah. I love this. This is great information. I don't want to get too far away from the conversation without, talking about your book, because in addition to speaking and mediation and arbitration and all the great things that you do, but you've also written a book, and I'd like for you to talk about that a little bit.
So I've written 3 books. So yeah, so in all different formats. So I've written, the first book that I wrote is Ace Your Workplace Investigations. And that is the step-by-step guide for avoiding friction, covering your assets, and earning employee trust. And so when you talk about keeping people on the right side of the next hashtag movement, so when we're talking about people complaining to the Department of Labor or, whoever else, it's doing the proper investigations when your employees start to say, hey, you owe me overtime, right? Or I'm supposed to be paid this, doing those investigations. The second one is an ebook, and it's Silent. Speak, Silence is not an option. And that's about moving from being a bystander to an advocate or an ally. And the third book, which I just wrote, is Conversations Change Things. And that is the perfect framework for engaging in courageous conversations.
I like that, because we have to have courageous conversations every day in business.
Yeah, right. And that came out of doing all of the listening sessions and training, after George Floyd, and really hearing people express to me that, they want to have conversations. They don't know how. They're afraid to offend. And so I just put in the 3 steps, and it's perfect because it's prepare, engage, reflect. Those are the 3 pillars. And so what do you do before, what do you do during, and what do you do after the conversation, so that you can have these, it's really a skill. Having these conversations is really a skill. So helping you to master that.
Yeah. So tell us what you've been doing lately.
Oh my gosh. What have I been doing? So a lot, right? I'm Jamaican, so I guess I'm a true Jamaican. I have all kinds of jobs. So in addition to being an arbitrator and a mediator, I am a professional speaker, trainer, and consultant in the areas of unconscious bias, bystander intervention, workplace investigations, and courageous conversations. So I spend most of my days training corporations, large businesses, on those issues and really helping to develop safe and inclusive cultures. And I'm also the founder of Ladies Who Leverage, which is a global women's group, which I'm so glad that you're a part of. And the whole purpose of Ladies Who Leverage is to empower women to really just leverage their expertise, their resources, and their relationships. So often, women-owned businesses are like the thing, right? So many women own businesses, but we also are sometimes timid or afraid of stepping into our greatness and asking for the things that we need and want. And so I don't like traditional networking, but I do love working with women and collaborating. So in Ladies Who Leverage, we call it collabosourcing, so that we work together. And it's really a safe space for women to come and learn and to ask questions and to ask for what they need and what they want so that they can move their businesses forward.
Kelly, I would never have guessed that you don't like traditional networking.
I don't.
Never would have guessed
So here's the funny part. I can speak to a room of like 1 million people. It would not bother me. I don't care how many people in the room. I don't get butterflies. I don't get scared. Nothing. When I have to walk into a networking event, you might as well just take me out. When I go there, I'm looking for the exit. Like, how do I get out of there? Because I just have this thing about intervening into these conversations. I feel like, everybody's in these conversations. The other thing I don't like is because I think of it as like business card bingo. And I'm not a small talk person. I'm very intentional about my words and the conversations that I have. And so I don't like this whole thing about like, oh, we have to get to know each other about, how's your dog and how's your cat and all that stuff before I can say to you, listen, this is what I do for a living and, blah, blah, blah. And, what are resources? So that's why I created Ladies Who Leverage, so that we can do away with all that. What do you need? What do you want? What does your business need? What does your career need to move forward? Like, what do you need? Is it a relationship? Is it a resource? Is it some education? And we give all of that in Ladies Who Leverage, because I don't have time.
Yeah.
For all the fluff.
Yep. I'm the same way. I mean, I learned how to network.
Yeah, I have not. In terms of that, I'm very good at engaging with people and having conversations, and we do our summits, and those are amazing. But we have to know what we're good at. And I know that just going and dropping myself into some event that's from 6 to 7 at night at some random place is not what I'm good at.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this has been great conversation. You have enlightened me. And I'm sure you've enlightened others. I can't see who's on because we're streaming in so many different places. I can't see the
celebrities
comments coming up. But before we wrap up,
yes,
share with me one last bit of advice that you have for small businesses as it relates to getting their legal house in order.
Figure out the structure of your business. What is the proper structure for your business? So oftentimes we end up being sole proprietors because we don't understand what it means to either be an LLC or to be a partnership or to be a corporation. And again, find the lawyer who does that type of business structuring and have them help you, because you need to understand what are the pros and cons as far as taxes go. as far as protecting your assets or your family's assets. So I think that's the first part. Like once you think of, what your business is going to be, what you're going to sell or whatever you're going to, what does that business look like? What is the structure of it? Because then that will also direct what your contracts look like, how you engage with other people in different businesses.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really good advice, because a lot of times, just like everything else, we jump in really quickly.
And just
And it's not until it's time when we experience situations where we have to apply for PPP and some other stuff, and we realize that, oh, we should have been something else.
Yes, exactly. And part of why we don't do it, and part of why people don't do it, is because they think, oh, I don't have the money. I promise you that you have the money. Then you don't want to have the money later, because when you're paying us up front proactively, that's different than when we have to react and have to defend you in court. That's a whole different set of money.
Yeah.
Right. So,
absolutely.
Really think about investing up front so that you can be proactive.
Yep. You got to pay to play.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay today, or you're going to pay tomorrow.
Right. Pay me now, pay me later. And later it's going to be a chunk of change.
Yeah, a chunk of change. That's right. Well, this has been great, great, great. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we wrap up, share with everybody how they can reach you and learn a little bit more about you.
So you can always go to my website, kellycharlescollins.com. So that's all one word. And on social media, I'm mostly on LinkedIn, Kelly Charles Collins, and on Twitter at HR Law Attorney.
Awesome. Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you. We'll have to do this again sometime really soon. Yes. Thank you for enlightening me and enlightening everybody else. And I will see you.
Got me back into my legal space.
Hey, well, you take that everywhere you go. I mean, you've been in the industry for a long time. You can't take
half my life, Lisa. Exactly half my life I have been a lawyer.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yes. Well, I will see you in Ladies Who Leverage.
Okay.
And thank you again. And we will talk again soon.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. All right. So that was a lot of great information. I really do appreciate everything that Kelly shared with us today. I mean, honestly, it is best to engage your legal house sooner than later to help make certain that strategically you are positioning the business, that you are leveraging yourself and your business appropriately, and that you're able to move forward with confidence and ease. Kelly brought to us a lot of great tips that I want us all to make certain that we consider. And, most importantly, just make certain that you have all of your legal documents and your legal resources in order. Make certain that you talk to them, engage them in your strategies and in your strategic planning process. So this session ends our programming for the month of October as it relates to building legal capacity. November starts our new programming. So in November, we will be discussing ways to show gratitude to our customers, to our employees, to our strategic partners, and ourselves. We will talk about engaging meaningful relationships and aligning with partnerships to make certain that we are moving forward graciously in the spaces where we find ourselves doing business. So I hope that you will tune in starting next week as we gear up for that new conversation. We will be back here next Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And until then, I hope that, again, we see you next week. And I am Lisa Anderson, Strategic Business Advisor, Virtual CFO with a Novel Transformation Solutions, and your $1 Million Mentor. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you again for listening in.